Hi, I'm Dr. Neil Kobrin, author of Emotional Well-Being, Embracing the Gift of Life. I'm also the president of the Academy of Mindful Psychology. And I'm here today to talk to you about some things that I hope can have a really powerful impact on your life, because they've had a really powerful impact on my life. In the last number of years, I've spent decades working with people as a clinical psychologist. I remember some years ago, I was teaching a course, one of the courses that people have to take to get licensed, the course in law and ethics. And we have an association that sets the standards about how we're supposed to practice. And I remember there was a line in that standard that said that our intent has to be the alleviation of suffering. And I thought that's incredible, because that's what I've done my whole life. I've worked with people, I've been oriented towards people to alleviate suffering. And there's a lot of suffering in the world. And I hope some of the things that I share with you today will help you to alleviate some of your suffering. The first thing you have to know is every life is filled with suffering. You really can't avoid it. There's a Buddhist saying, in each life there's 10,000 joys and there's 10,000 sorrows. And really the whole thing is how we relate to those joys and how we relate to those sorrows. And all too often what we do is we just so attach and we seek everything that's joyous, and we just resist and we run away and we treat with aversion anything that really is sorrowful. And the problem is that it takes us out of our bodies, it takes us away from who we really are. So today I'm going to really talk about something that I call mindful psychology. And mindful psychology is a term that I've used to really describe several things that, when put together in a holistic way, when integrated, can really have a very significant impact on how we experience the world and who we are. So mindful psychology really is an integration of psychology, both Western and Eastern psychology. I'll talk a little bit about the difference in that attitude and the kinds of significant elements of both. It's about neuroscience. Wait till we talk about neuroscience. It's unbelievable what we know now about the brain. But it's also about health. It's about things like sleep. Sleep is one of the least embraced things that we can do in our life. And what I'm saying about sleep is that sleep deficits contribute to so many negative things that happen. Our memory, the way we function in the world. I know somebody recently had a baby and she's pretty sleep deprived. And I'll tell you, she's somewhat tough to be around, right? Because she's very stressed. She doesn't have the emotional resources because she just is not getting enough sleep. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And of course, exercise and nutrition. Those are all important things. So let me start with mindfulness. As you look at me right now, the thing that I really want you to experience is this is it. This is really the only moment that we have. We cannot experience any other moment than the moment that you're experiencing right this minute. Because that's it. And what we frequently do is we give up the moments by not being present. And mindfulness is all about being fully present in the moment, embracing the moment. The subtitle of my book is Embracing the Gift of Life. This is an amazing experience that we have all been given. And so many of us have an attitude about our lives that is so negative. When the Dalai Lama came to this country, he was introduced to this concept called self-hatred. He'd never heard of it before. He had no idea what it was. He said, self-hatred, what do you mean self-hatred? And they had to explain to him that there are many people that live in the West that hate themselves. And this was a foreign concept to him. This is something that had never existed in his culture. And he finally began to understand, and really what he said is that people need to have self-compassion. We're all trying as hard as we can. And when we behave in ways that we're not proud of, ways that hurt other people, it's always based on the same thing. it's always about fear. It's always about anxiety. It's never our highest self, because who we really are, I mean, we are loving, gentle beings, despite what Sigmund Freud had to say. You know, some of the great theorists in the world talk about, you know, we're aggressive by nature. Well, what happens? What happens if you believe that? Well, that's what you become, right? We want to embrace love. We want to embrace compassion. We want to embrace not just joy, but the joy that we experience when other people are joyful. We want to live in a place that is giving, because giving is expansive, right? Taking is contracting. And what I want to share with you about neuroscience is that we now know that what we attend to, what we see, what we look at, what we think influences everything in regards to how our brain functions and how we feel and operate in the world. I want you to think about this. There's something called mirror neurons. Mirror neuron simply is a neuron, and I'll talk a little bit more about the brain, but it's a neuron that basically, whatever it sees, it duplicates that response in the brain. So they took a pair of monkeys, they put one monkey on one side of the room, they put a monkey on another side of the room, they wrapped these things around their heads so they could really get effective readings. And they fed that one monkey a peanut. And they watched what the brain did. And they mapped exactly what was going on inside of the brain of that monkey. Well, then they looked at the monkey that was watching that monkey. And they went, oh my God. That monkey's brain was doing exactly the same thing as the monkey that was eating that peanut. Now, this may seem, I don't know, simplistic or not so substantial, but think of the implications of this. Well, we were able to determine, based on that little experiment, is that what we see, what we attend to in the world, affects the way our brain functions. So, I mean, what are the ramifications to that? Well, one ramification is you better be careful about what you allow in. Right? There's a saying that you need to post sentinels at the gateway of your mind. Well, what does that mean? It means be careful. Be careful what you take in. Right? Look for the joy. Look for the gratitude. Look for the delight in life. Because when you do, it affects the way your brain functions. And when we're based in fear, when we sit and we watch CNN all day long, and when it's orange or red, whatever those codes are that keep us, you know, so anxious, that's affecting a part of our brain that says danger. And it puts us in a constant survival mode. And when we're in a constant survival mode, you know what happens? We release certain chemicals in our bodies. Now those chemicals, for example, cortisol, they're good for short-term responses. You know, I mean, a tiger jumps out of the bush, you better hope that there's a whole bunch of cortisol that's going to be pumped into you so you could run. But what if there is no tiger? And what if you think there's a tiger there all the time? Well, that cortisol just flows through our body. And you know what it does? It literally degrades our brain. It interrupts the process that allows us to feel calm, to feel joyous, to feel love. It makes us uptight, contracted. That's why mindfulness is a process that really brings us back to orienting to the present, being non-judgmental. Meditation, for example, is something that we know increases the activity in the left hemisphere of the brain. All right, everybody loves the right hemisphere, right? All the artists, they're all the creative ones, right hemisphere. Well, we know something now. We know that the left hemisphere is where positive emotions are. You know, they did a study years ago. They looked at stroke victims. And they looked at stroke victims that had damage to the left hemisphere versus stroke victims that had damage to the right hemisphere. And what do you think they found? So those that were damaged in the left hemisphere were so negative and bitter and angry. No, I mean, you would think that would be a natural response to a stroke. Well, the interesting thing is those that were stroked on the right hemisphere, they were like, you know what? I need to do some work, but I'll get over it. It's so powerful what happens in regards to the way these systems work. There's a guy in England. I love this guy. His name is Paul Gilbert, Dr. Paul Gilbert. He's got a therapy, and this is not about therapy, he happens to have one, called compassion-focused therapy. His whole thing is to bring compassion into the world and really into yourself. And what's interesting about what Paul says is it's not your fault. He talks about evolutionary psychology. What does that mean? We have the brain we have, not because of anything we've done. This is how it's evolved. The brain that we walk around with has been, in design for millennium. But it is our responsibility. We can't help that our brain is oriented to survival. We can't help that our brain is oriented towards anxiety. But we can address the issues by bringing positivity and joy and delight into our life. We can have a gratitude about life. We can embrace this gift of life. And I'm going to say just very quickly to wrap this up, I've always sat with the knowledge that it is an absolute miracle that I'm on this planet. I was born into a family that it was highly unlikely that I ever would have arrived. My sister, who's 10 years older than me, when she was 2 years old, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Didn't know what was wrong with her. Just at the time that my mother found out she was pregnant with my brother. So 2 years later, when they were going to begin a series of operations on my sister, so maybe one day she could walk, a 10-year process actually. My brother falls off the bed, 2 years old. My mother walks into the room, and my brother is dragging his body across the room. What's happening? She picks up the phone, she calls a doctor. Those days, the doctors came to the house, and sure enough, he had polio. 2 kids, 2 handicapped children. 2 different hospitals in 2 different states. How was I ever born? And it wasn't an accident. My mother had the fortitude, the desire, the drive, the life to bring me to this place. And I have always embraced that. I've always had just immense gratitude for that. And I let it be a guidepost. So whatever it is you need for your guidepost to really embrace this life, spread love. Help your fellow man and woman. Put that dime in that meter when you see that expiring thing pop up. Pick up that piece of trash, because I guarantee you, you're going to feel better and you're going to love your life more. I'm Dr. Neil Kobrin. More information, go to drneilkobrin.com. Thanks a lot.